It's such a great pleasure for me to be with you this evening and to thank the Ripkins for what they are doing for our American young people. I like this little video, and I hope you liked it too, because it told the story of immigration and immigrants. Those two little people, my father was about this tall, my mother was about that tall. And they found each other here in America, in New York City, and were married and had two children. My sister, Marilyn, who was a teacher for most of her life, and she's now passed on, and then me. And I was a modest and rather mediocre student. But the one thing about my family was that they would never let you quit. And the expectations they had for you were simple. One, we do have expectations for you. We didn't come to this country from Jamaica and leave our family so that you could stick something up your nose or disgrace this family. So just remember, wherever you go in life, remember the expectations we have for you. And also, make sure you never shame the family. And that was drilled into me. And I moved up, as you saw in the film. And after I became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, people would come up to me and say, well, General Powell, what year did you graduate from West Point? So I wasn't a West Pointer, I'm Christmas help, you know? And they would say, you know, tell us more about where you were born. Harlem, raised in the South Bronx section of the 41st Precinct, known as Fort Apache. And I grew up in a land of total diversity, the block I lived on. Everything you could name from any part of the world, there was somebody living on that street. And I said to them, this is who I was, this is how I grew up. And then they would say, well, when you were 10 years old, did you dream you could become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? Yeah, there I was. I was about 10 years old, and I was standing in the corner of 163rd and Kelly Street. I said, well, you're going to grow up and become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Armed Forces of the United States. I have trouble telling some of my foreign officials, it was unthinkable, it was unattainable at that time. I was a black kid of immigrant parents living in a poor neighborhood and having gone to public schools all the way through, from kindergarten all the way through the City College of New York. And we were still living in a nation of segregation, Plessy versus Ferguson, and it was unattainable, and it couldn't happen. And it hadn't ever happened. But it did. It did because of this country changing, of this country growing, of this country moving, of this country becoming more diverse, and increasingly recognizing the value of that diversity, of this country always remaining an immigrant nation, never forgetting where we started, with the immigrants who arrived here back in the 17th century. And it happened. And I'm so proud of it. I'm so proud of my country because they gave me this opportunity. Proud to have had the opportunity to serve my nation in so many different ways. And it all started here with those two little people, laborers who came here on banana boats, United Fruit banana boats, to start a new life and to raise a family. They didn't care whether we became doctors, lawyers, or anything else. The only thing they cared about is do right, have a sense of shame, and make sure that you have your expectations and my expectations, our expectations, in our hearts forever. I've used this example of my growing up many, many times. And once down in Miami Beach, I went to a Boys and Girls Club that was on the other side of the highway, not on the east side of Palm Beach. And I was talking to these boys and girls in the club, and I always put these kids down the floor in front of me so I can get right down with them. And all the adults go away, leave me alone. And one day I gave this sort of speech, this Horatio Alger speech to these kids, and they were listening very intently. And when I was through, thinking I'd done a pretty good job, I asked her any questions. And a boy about 9 years old raised his hand and he stood up. And he said, John, that's a very nice story, and I'm glad you had parents like that in a home like that. But what do you do if your father hates you? What if you're going to school that isn't teaching you? What do you do if your family is always breaking up? What do you do then? Can you still make it? And he turned over my whole cart. And I paused for a moment. I said, yes, son, you can make it. This is America. Have expectations for yourself, and you will have help. A week later, I joined the Boys and Girls Club board of directors and was with the clubs for many years until I went back into government as Secretary of State. I said, you have the Boys and Girls Club. The people come here to this club to help you every afternoon. You've got people who know what you need, and if you can't get it from the family, we've got to come into your life and help you. I created the America's Promise Foundation that deals with the same things and the same ambitions and the same needs as you are doing with all the Ripken facilities that have been put in. Kids need a responsible, caring, loving adult in their lives. That was our first promise to kids. Secondly, they need safe places, like a baseball field, to work and to play. Third, they need a healthy start in life. And that's one of the great tragedies of this country, that we have people who do not have health care. Every American should have health care. It should be an obligation of our country. The fourth promise we had in the America's Promise was that every child should be given the opportunity for quality education that will lead to a good future and work. And then fifth, every child should be taught in life to give back to the society and the country that's given you so much. Service to others should be embedded in your life and in your soul. You know what? The Ripken Foundation, with all of its success, they meet every single one of these goals that we felt were important. Done a marvelous job. This family's come together, and for all these years, they have done all of these things. Build baseball fields, safe places to learn and to grow. Have the presence of responsible, caring, loving adults. Coaches, the players who go back and work with the kids. Every child should have good health care, and especially the education part of it, because ultimately they have to leave the ball fields and go get a job, and they need an education to do that. But you have done so much, and what I've heard tonight from all of you, so proud of what you've done and for the commitments that have been made to do more, because we're not even close to closing the gap. We're not even close to getting these horrible things out of our communities and get crime off our streets and make sure every kid gets the things I have just listed. One night I was home and watching television, and suddenly a show came on. It was a news show from Denver. They were covering a high school commencement exercise. And they brought up to the camera the kid who was the top kid in the class, and he was a valedictorian, and he came from a weak home, all the problems we know exist in our homes, minority family, weak home. And the priest, it was a Catholic high school, was standing there talking to him. And the reporter said, well, how did you get through this with all the problems you've had in your life? How did you graduate from this demanding school as number one and the valedictorian? And he said calmly, I was never given the opportunity to fail. There were people taking care of him, people such as you, such as we see in every club, every ball field, all the things that Ripkens are doing to get these kids and to teach them you don't have to fail. And to teach them the other thing that this kid said in Denver. He leaned forward again and he said, I've changed my family's history. That's the most important thing to remember. What you do, especially for kids who are in need, kids who are minority, whatever you want to characterize them as, when you give them that education and when you give them a belief in themselves, a belief in their families, a belief in this country, and they know they can succeed, they will be changing the history of their family. Their family will no longer have dropouts. They'll have kids who are graduates and accomplished. I stayed in touch with this young man for the next several years. Once I located him and introduced myself, he came to Washington, D.C. and went to college, Georgetown University. And then when that was over, he came to see us again, Mrs. Sofrino and me. We became good friends to him. And he wanted to go to law school. And now that kid who came from difficult circumstances, he didn't know if he could make it, got his law degree a year or two ago and has changed the history of his family. And that's what we want to do for all of our children. Reach down, touch them, pick them up. People sometimes say, but you're a soldier. What do you know about training? What do you know about kids? What do you know? Hey, do you have a college degree in education? I said, no, I just trained kids for 35 years. Every kid that came in the Army was my kid, my responsibility. I had to make sure they left the Army much better than when they came in. And they did. Great youngsters. You're youngsters. But that attitude of discipline, expectations, and shame has to be put in the heart of all of our kids. You do that too. So I cannot tell you how proud I am to stand before you this evening, having been given this designation by the family. Makes me enormously proud because you're doing everything I believe in. You're doing everything I think we need to do in order to make sure that every child reaches the full potential of that child and leaves the education system getting a good job, and above all, believing in him or herself, and above all that, believing in this great country of ours, the United States of America. Thank you all so very, very much.